Welcome back, everybody, to the Fretboard Journal podcast. I'm your host, Jason Verlinde, the founder of the Fretboard Journal magazine. And if LinkedIn is to be believed, I just celebrated my 19th work anniversary. I cannot believe it. The Fretboard Journal is old enough to go to Canada and get a beer. Who would have ever imagined? I also couldn't imagine 19 years ago that we would be doing this print magazine for so long, that we would be doing podcasts, that we would be doing events and all the other stuff that we do now. The funniest thing is my sales pitch to you all for why the Fretboard Journal is special in 2024 is not a whole lot different than it was back in 2005. We want to create something timeless. We want to create something that is not ad-driven. We want to share stories about guitar culture and interview people we think are interesting and important. And we want to have fun with it. And we still are. Our 55th issue of the Keepsake Fretboard Journal is about to come out. If you haven't joined us yet, please do so at fretboardjournal.com. Your subscriptions power all that I do here. We have a Patreon for this show as well now. Join us if you haven't yet. I would love your support. And one of the interesting byproducts of doing this magazine and these podcasts and meeting so many interesting people from the world of guitar is that we now throw this cool annual event in Chicago called the Fretboard Summit. It is, to my knowledge, the only open to the public event where you all can meet folks like today's guest, Thomas Ripsam of Martin Guitars. He is the CEO of Martin, and I'm sharing with you all a session that we had with Thomas where he really candidly, openly talked about some of the stuff that's keeping him up at night. He talked about supply chain issues and how they'll be selling guitars in the future and so much more. This was a really insightful chat. And I have to say, a bunch of folks from the industry were in the audience as well, because as Martin and Taylor and a couple of other brands go, so does the rest of the industry, it seems. I learned a lot. I hope you will as well. Again, the Fretboard Summit is this magical weekend. We are currently selling tickets already for our 2025 summit. Go to fretboardsummit.org, and for the next few weeks, you can get early bird 3-day pricing. It's $350 for all 3 days of entertainment and programming and the guitar show and the parties and all the fun stuff that we offer. This is turning into a really important and really special event for the gear industry. If you don't believe me, go onto YouTube, type in Fretboard Summit, and watch any of the videos that have been posted over the last month or so. A lot of folks are showing up. Now, the thing I want to impress upon you all is attendance is limited. We don't want to cram 5,000 people through the doors of the Old Town School of Folk Music. So while this event is open to the public and any of you all can sign up, it's first come, first served, and eventually it will sell out. And I know it's going to sell out. Get a ticket while you can. That's my advice for everybody. The other thing I want to just tell you all about is like right around the corner and here in Washington State. We made a short film with Ben Harper about his relationship to one of his favorite pieces of gear, one of his Dumble amplifiers. And it's getting its official world premiere screening on October 8th. Here in Seattle at SIF's Doc Fest. So if anybody wants to come say hi to me, support what I do, and see this movie on the big screen and meet director Ryan Corey, who we worked with on it, please get a ticket. It's actually screening right before the big Eno documentary that our friend Gary Hustwit, who has written for the Fretboard Journal, directed. So it's going to be a fun night. I would love to see some of you there. And this movie is not streaming anywhere right now. We're probably going to tour around a little bit. We're going to do some of these festivals and things and have some fun with it and hopefully get started on our next short film, which I'm really excited about. Quick thanks to our sponsors, Mike and Mike's Guitar Bar here in Seattle, Washington. One of the most fun and eclectic guitar stores around. There's room after room of acoustics, electrics, synths, you name it. They have a full service repair and restoration shop. It is a blast to visit. mmguitarbar.com is how you can see all that they have online. You should also be following them on YouTube and Instagram. Our friends at Peghead Nation are offering you all your first month free or $20 off of any annual subscription with the promo code Fretboard. Peghead Nation is this incredibly cool instruction portal Some of my favorite musicians are teaching there. Whether you want to learn bluegrass or blues or jazz or anything Americana related, they have you covered. Check out what they are up to. And then finally, our friends at Stringjoy Strings are offering you all 10% off your first order at stringjoy.com. All you have to do is use the promo code Fretboard when you check out. They've got banjo strings now. They've got guitar strings. They've got mandolin strings. They can do custom orders. You name it, go to stringjoy.com. And now, without further ado, I'm going to share my conversation with Thomas Ripsam. This is actually his second appearance on the Fretboard Journal podcast, so if you want to dig a little deeper, do a search. You'll find his first appearance. And thanks, as always, to everyone out there for tuning in. I think we have some folks who will be milling in as we start, but we want to get back on schedule. So this is Thomas Ripsam, CEO of Martin Guitars, everybody.
Good afternoon.
And we'll be recording this for a podcast and maybe some other things. So please, if we do field questions from you, or if you think of a question at the end, we'll just have you approach that microphone and maybe the first person can just hand it off to whoever's next, and we'll go from there, and it should be fun. Thank you, first of all, for being a part of the Fretboard Summit and being a part of the Fretboard Journal in general for almost 20 years now. It means the world.
Absolutely. Jason, thank you for having us. And this is an amazing event and great sessions this morning with Ben Harper and Leventhal and Rosanna Cash. It was wonderful. So off to a great start.
How many folks here have listened to the podcast I already did with Thomas? Okay, about half. So for folks who don't know, you started 2021?
Yeah, a little bit over 3 years ago.
And you don't necessarily, everybody remembers Chris Martin IV, and, he's part of the lineage. You came from the outside world, but guitars have been a huge part of your life, even when you were in more of the business end.
Yeah, I've been a guitar nerd probably since my teens. I collect them, I play them. I like to create music, and I knew about all the companies, and of course I knew about Martin and the special place that Martin has had in this industry. And yeah, so even though I was an outsider, I knew a lot about the space.
And you shadowed a luthier or worked with a luthier.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I always wanted to find out what's involved in building an acoustic guitar, since I like to play them. I love the guitars. And so I found a luthier in Delaware and built one guitar. Obviously very different from building so many guitars that we now build at Martin Guitars. Not comparable, but what I would say is it taught me a lot about what can go wrong with just one guitar. And a lot can go wrong, and of course we do have a lot of builders here, so you know what I'm talking about. And it's constant problem solving. And then when I started at Martin, I spent the initial time in the factory working through the different departments to really understand on the ground how Martin goes about its business and the building of guitars. And I have a genuine interest in the crafting, the building, the artisanship of what's involved with guitars. So, yeah, I definitely, I know enough to be dangerous.
What was, so if we had to ask you to go in like the witness protection program and go low profile, which of the jobs at Martin on the factory where you're like, I could see myself doing this in a different universe?
Well, I'm going to stay humble. It takes a lot. But if I could just create magic and be a superpower, I think I would go into purling and inlaying, the custom shop, because I do think what we do there, we basically can create anything, right? And create a wonderful guitar, but with the beauty, with the playability, with the sound that's tailored to specifics of the players. And there's a wide spectrum. So just I think the variety that's involved in that is just wonderful. And that's what I'd love to do if I was a builder.
Yeah. So at an event like this, by its nature, we have all these Martin historians and people who work on the Martins from the 30s and 40s. We have plenty of coverage for that. Hopefully you all know that, and it's going all weekend long. I think this is a rare opportunity to talk to somebody about the future of Martin and where things are going. I'm curious. So 2024, I think it's universally known. The COVID bubble where everybody was buying guitars has fizzled out. Mm-hmm. What has 2024 been like? Let's just start there. Like, what's it been like for you, generally speaking, at Martin?
Well, maybe we start with 2023 because that was the foundation to think about 2024. In 2023, Martin celebrated its 190th anniversary. So very long time. And it was a wonderful year for us. We actually, as a company, had grown over the last few years probably by 50%. And last year we built over 130,000 instruments. We also do strings. We make our own strings. But a lot of instruments, and frankly, even though the boom finished last year, that was very clear, and we felt that too. We've done really, really well as a company and exceeded our expectations. So that was 2023. So going into 24, we absolutely actually had no real idea what 2024 would bring. So a lot of uncertainty, a lot of questions. So, for example, will there be a recession? Mm-hmm. Right? Questions like the challenges we saw on the international side, will that continue or will it change? So, and the one thing I have to say, and I don't know how others who run companies here, guitar making companies here, but what I would say, in my experience so far, there is not a lot of precision when it comes to predicting the future. Does that sound familiar? Thank you. So it's not just me. I'm glad. Mm-hmm. But it's really true. I mean, we obviously looked at trajectories for the instruments at all price points that we create, right, from roughly $400 up to infinity, literally. So obviously we looked at different parts of our business and what we thought would happen. We looked at history, but we absolutely knew that for a big part of this industry, right now, the demand direction is down, right? And so down overall, not down at every individual model or family, but down overall. Whereas for us, at the high end or mid to high end, when we talk about price points and segments, we've seen very strong continued business and demand and opportunities. So it's a very mixed picture, but the uncertainty is absolutely a big part of 2024. We feel pretty good where we are right now. I think we were pretty careful about setting our goals not too ambitious, and we are ahead of plan. We feel good about the things we did. And the thing that we also did, and that really started in 2022, was we basically said the industry will continue to go through cycles. And the boom will definitely be over at some point. But in general, the industry goes through cycles. But let's not run our business as a cyclical business. But instead, focus on the things we know matter to be relevant and be even more relevant, right? So what matters? We do think what matters is that you really understand players and the opportunities that come with players, and then be able to go after these opportunities, right? And usually it's not one model that will make your business. It's a lot of little things to go after. We know artists and influencers are super important. We know channels, not just maybe the traditional channels, but a changing landscape there. That's really important. And so for us, we invested in things that we felt will allow us to participate in the trends that are absolutely happening, right? And at the same time, Ben Harper was wonderful this morning. He mentioned 1 foot in the past, 1 foot in the future. That is actually our mantra, that we literally talk about that all the time. And what that means is 1 foot in the past, we know what we are all about, what our identity is, and that's really important. And we also know that when you go back in history, you find nuggets and jewels that, frankly, are still valued out there. And that leads to things like reissues or anniversary models. But there's also the foot in the future part. And for a company at our size, it's really important that we evolve, right? So we feel good about where we are. Where I would say we have a lot of focus right now, and that's probably also not a surprise for you all, is that you can't raise prices forever. And so the cost of doing business has dramatically increased. And it's not just increased because of COVID. I think it's steadily increased, at least for us. And we have a lot of complexity, but the cost of doing business is becoming more and more a challenge. And that is around materials, it's around people, it's everywhere. And so we are very proactively tackling that because ultimately it is a business, right? And if we are not profitable, we won't be able to do things that ultimately resonate with players and keep going with the times. And so I would say that's probably the biggest concern for us is just the general business environment, the cost, the complexity, and that's just not going to go away. So we need to get better in managing it than maybe relying on our traditional ways, which involved a lot, people and manual, everything. So those are some of the things that we're thinking through.
Automation and ways to streamline.
And it's not just automation, because automation is nothing new in this industry. It happened actually for decades.
Sure.
But I think what is different is, and I'm sure some people will shoot me for this, is things like generative AI, artificial intelligence, where we already use it in our business, but we only use it in things like IT. But we know we're going to use it in things like design, right? Or how we engage with consumers. So we know things like that happen in the world, they will impact us. And rather than fearing it, we actually try to actively embrace it, but also do it at the right pace, right? Martin, I think, always had a slow and steady approach to business, so we never rush into things or make wholesale changes in what we do. So there's a right balance between embracing, changing, but also doing at a pace where we don't lose our identity, and for sure we never jeopardize quality.
Yeah. You have such an interesting and complicated situation. You've got all these employees, they need jobs. The whole community around Nazareth, it's almost, I wouldn't say it's a company town, but so many people are employed by Martin. It's quite a burden, I imagine.
If something happens at Martin, the whole Lehigh Valley knows about it instantly.
Yeah,
Yes, exactly.
That has to be overwhelming. You know, when I ask Martin fans, when I tell them I'm interviewing Thomas, like I get all these questions about, binding and satin necks and all these quirks. But overall, your job is like, I've got to keep this company profitable. I've got to think 5 years down the line. I'm sure you have people working on these little iterative changes, but you're probably planning way beyond 2025 and 2026.
Absolutely. I always refer to what we as a team are doing right now is writing the next chapter for Martin, right? So I literally think about 10, 15 years from now, when you look back, and you say, okay, in that time frame, what happened with Martin. Have we made it a better place? Have we made it more prepared for the future? And so absolutely, that is my job, but it's not solely my job. And that's the beauty about Martin as well. It's not a one person's company, right? It is owned by the Martin family, but all the things that are needed to keep Martin successful involves the 1,100 people we have in the company, and they all matter. And that's so the team and working as a team on these things is really what excites me, because they're all smart and they're all passionate and hardworking. And I'm a true believer that use everybody that you have at your disposal. And just to give you an example, and maybe that also resonates with this audience, whenever I'm at a concert, I always look for the guitar players. What brands are they playing? Right? And I always think, I hope the 1,100 other people at Martin do that too. And not just what guitar or brand is this guitar player playing, but do we know the player? And if we do, are we reaching out, right? So it's the power of the team. I'm a really strong believer in that, because there's a multiplier effect. And at a time when a lot of change is happening in the outside world, one person that's a genius will not allow your company to move forward successfully.
Here's a question I just thought of. You guys have famously been not litigious. There are so many Martin copies out there. There are many in this building. Some brands are not like that. I'm guessing you agree with the last several decades of letting the non-Martin Martins exist in the world?
Yeah. Well,
putting on the spot.
First of all, what's the saying? Imitation is the greatest flattery. So that's maybe one perspective. I think Martin, for decades, has had activities in place to protect our IP and to really look at what's going on out there. And I can assure you, we are all over looking at what is going on around us. And if we see copying that is a misuse, we go after it. And there's a lot. And, but that's how we approach it. The interesting thing with Martin is that you mentioned decades. I think we've had that approach now for decades, right? But that doesn't necessarily protect us for the almost 2 centuries of what Martin has done. Mm-hmm. So it is an interesting topic. It's a complicated topic, but you protect what you can, and the rest you can't, right? Mm-hmm. But we're watching that topic very closely, and that didn't start with me. I think the company, as I mentioned, has done that for decades. But at the same time, what I also would say, when I joined this industry, I was really welcomed by a lot of the other makers and brands. And I have to say a big thank you to everybody who was very open. And so, there's the legal side to the business, but I think there's also the community side to the business. And ultimately, we benefit from exchange and sharing ideas. So it's a little bit of balance. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned some of the outreach you've done with influencers and where things are headed in the world of guitar media right now. But economy aside, trends aside, you can't ignore the trends, but what do you want Martin to be doing 5 years from now that maybe you're not doing on all cylinders right now? Or what are some of the broader initiatives or thoughts you have of in 5 years we should be headed this way?
Well, we're working on it right now, on a lot of different things. But the one thing that I'm actually the most excited about is we're working on our culture, right? And how so? What is the goal there? what we learned is that because we've been around for so long, we often think that whatever we do is the right way to do or the best way to do. But again, when the world is changing more quickly, that's just not always what helps you the most as a company. So the culture work that we're doing is actually helping our people at all levels to look left, right, up, down, challenge more what we do. And even in manufacturing, you would say, well, Martin, we certainly build, one of the best guitars. We are definitely in that tier where we don't have to be too humble. We know how to build really great guitars. But we also know that's evolving as well, right? And we need the people that think that way. And so that is a big focus. So being more outward oriented, and then also not thinking that there's somebody else in the company that will step up. I can step up. I can initiate change. And so, that may sound trivial, but for a company that has a lot of tradition over generations, it's actually not so trivial. And I do think that's going to give us a big lift. The other thing I would say, and I know we have lots of players here, but we also have lots of builders here and maybe dealers. I'm very optimistic about the future in our industry. And that optimism comes from, I know what excites me as a player, and I always am on the lookout for something new or something different or something that excites me. And I was recently in Japan visiting some of the dealers. And whenever I go to a store, I always ask them, what percentage of your customers are females? Right? And I heard actually quite a decent percentage, not the majority, but a decent percentage. And then I asked several managers from different stores, and what's different about how females may go about the guitar buying versus males? Not to overgeneralize, but just directionally. And it was interesting to hear that, when a lot of females in Japan, maybe different in other markets, but in Japan, apparently a lot of females, they pick up a guitar and then they may be excellent players, but they go in front of a mirror to see, how do I look with the guitar? And apparently, the color brown resonates a lot in Japan. And I'm not pointing this out to focus specifically on Japan. For me, this is a perfect example how little we actually know and do and think about opportunity when it comes to opportunity. I think there's limitless opportunity. When you think about all the different players, all the different generations, and all the needs they have, and the opportunities that presents for us, right? And we at Martin, we offer a lot of variety. We love variety. We love challenge. Even though a lot of people think about our traditional models when they think about Martin, or they may think about one model like the D28, when you actually look at what we do across our spectrum, it's probably the most varied set of instruments that you can get in the acoustic guitar space. And we love that. But I think we're only scratching the surface today in tuning into players' needs, preferences, what they love, and being able to do something with it. Because it's not all going to be the next blockbuster model that you can create. It's probably more limited stuff, smaller runs, but being faster with it. So those are some of the things I would say really exciting, lots more opportunity, and things we're working on.
Yeah. 2 follow-ups to that. I know we have some dealers in the audience. Do we have many mirrors at the guitar showrooms that you guys run? Because that sounds like we all could benefit from that. No, none of them. Okay. Is there a model, maybe it's a Fretboard Journal community thing, but, we deal with a lot of bluegrass artists, a lot of the traditional leaning D18, D28. Is there a Martin model that you if you don't need to give us actual production totals for a year, but the general public would be surprised how many they sell, that you guys sell.
I think the general public would be surprised how many models from our standard line, right? So the Dreadnoughts, the Triple O's, we actually sell. The D28, I mean, it is still an incredibly popular model that sells just incredibly well.
Yeah. All right.
But but I would say that the traditional stuff we offer, there's a lot of value there. There's a lot of demand for that. But what we've also seen with models like the Inception Maple, there's demand for that also, appetite, right? And that was a guitar where we said, let's do something with domestic tone woods. Let's do something where we don't just use domestic tone woods on models we already have. We want to create something new in terms of sonic spectrum, in terms of the appearance, and using woods to get the best tone that we were after out of the model. And that's also been really popular. So back to the variety point, I think there's a lot of opportunity across different spectrums. I love when people focus on the traditional stuff. I love when people want new stuff. And I think we try to maintain a little bit of balance. You know, 1 foot in the past, 1 foot in the future.
Yeah. On that note, and this will be my final question, so if anybody's got questions, maybe one person get the mic and then you can pass it around. But how happy are you? Do you feel like when you're trying to replicate, whether it's through the Authentic series or whatever, when you're trying to replicate these models that are either in your museum or that these touring musicians constantly show you and say, hey, have you seen this? How happy are you with how close the new ones are getting to that gold standard? Or is there always going to be room and it's hopeless?
Well, I don't really know how I can credibly answer that question. But how about I use a quote that one of our customers, dealers, actually often uses. And George Gruen often says, the Martins today are probably the best Martins ever built. And he knows what he's talking about. And that doesn't mean that there isn't the golden period and that is, that isn't valued. Of course, we all know the traditional, the vintage models, all that, there's all value. But I think, to your point, how close are we to the gold standard? I think we've been very close to the gold standard at different points in time throughout the history of Martin. But there's always the quest for, can we improve on it, right? And that's what we're doing. I mean, some of you may know about our X series, and that this year we announced a remastered X series, and that was based on feedback from dealers, feedback from players, what they would like to see, plus our own just look and using these instruments as well. So it's a continuing evolution, and I don't think it ever stops to say, now we're done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did we have any questions from anyone out there? Oh, can someone grab the mic? Whoever's closest to the mic, you get to go first because you took the initiative. Oh, you can pull it out and then just hand it to the people behind you when you're done. It should release. There you go. Maybe. Yeah. Hey.
Thank you very much for being here. You mentioned IP in your initial remarks. How well do you think the patent system in the United States does with your ability to protect your intellectual property?
Wow.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for asking that question. You know, it is what it is, right? And there are always improvements to be made, but it is what it is. And I think our industry has its set of patent issues and IP issues. I worked a lot in high tech, And believe me, in high tech, a lot of high tech companies have much, much bigger IP and patent issues than we have in our industry. But there's a responsibility for you as a builder and luthier to protect. That's number one, right? And my suspicion is, if you go back 100 years ago, or maybe 60 years ago, there probably weren't that many companies around that actively thought about, I probably should protect these designs or IPs. There were patents, right? But I doubt that there was really kind of the same sense of urgency to actually protect. So I think there's a lot of responsibility on the builder to protect. And then the system, it is what it is, right? Clearly, things could be improved. But as we also know from music creation, it's also not a simple issue that can just simply be resolved because of the evolutionary nature of how music is created and how some of these instruments were created over time as well.
Thank you.
I don't know there was a long-winded attempt to answer your question. Not sure I succeeded.
All right, we got.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you, sir. I have a question and a comment. Earlier, I think you were talking about in 2022, you guys are looking ahead at stuff, and you mentioned looking at different channels. I'm assuming that was sales channels you were referencing. And what might that be? What does that look like?
Yeah. Well,
like direct sales or?
Yeah. So, thank you, Steve. I hope it's not a surprise at this point for anybody that we are in a multi-channel environment. What does multi-channel mean? Right? You have your indirect channels, and that may involve dealers, distributors. It may involve marketplaces, like Amazon or Reverb. It may involve influencers. Right? There are influencers now that sell. And what we also know, and that's not a music industry specific phenomenon, is that in a lot of consumer industries, the brands, the manufacturers, also want to get closer to the consumer. And that means that a lot of manufacturers have established a direct sales channel as well. And that doesn't mean that it's one at the exclusion of the other, right? I think for us, we see multiple channels between the consumer and our offering. And our approach generally is we want to make it easy for the consumer and the player to find information, demo and try out product, and then buy as easily as possible. And that's kind of our general approach. And that's why we've built out, I think we continue to strengthen our relationships with dealers and distributors, but we've also established a direct sales channel as well. And it's a sales channel, but what it really also is a channel that gives you a lot of information and insight about the consumer, right, and the player. And it's not just about feedback on the products, it's feedback on the experience. And that's maybe something I should have mentioned earlier. I do think the guitar making industry traditionally has focused a lot and maybe too much on the product and maybe not enough on the player. I'm saying that, right? Yeah. You can disagree. That's my my perspective, and that's also our perspective. Martin, plus we had some partners to work with us on what matters. We know, and it's not just in music. We know that experience is becoming more and more important, right? And why is that? Because we all shop from Amazon, and if something is not available, convenient, fast, reliable, we can offer the best instrument or product, but those things, people compare, right? And so the overall experience is really important. I mean, the other example I could could mention here, we do a lot with custom shop. And when you think about custom shop, those are the most expensive instruments that you can buy. And if you ask yourself, well, if I think about if somebody is interested in buying a custom shop instrument from Martin, are they getting the experience, the premium, luxury, high-end experience across their entire experience with us, and not just from the product, right? So back to the channels, the direct link to the consumer for us is really important. And we work with our indirect partners, dealers, distributors, to talk more about what do we know and what do players want and need, and how can we work together. But we also like to get direct information and data and insights, and that's so it's part of what we do.
Thank you. My comment would be, I wanted to thank you for stepping into this role and helming this iconic brand and company with a grace that doesn't always accompany a change in leadership. So we really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That was Steve McCreary, the GM of Collings Guitars. We got time for, I think, one more. So who had a really good one?
Pressure's no pressure. Thank you. I'm just curious about what supply chain issues you might be dealing with now, and what concerns you might have about looking forward maybe 5 or more years, particularly about the traditional woods that Martin has used.
Yeah. So when it comes to traditional woods or alternative materials, I mean, it's very obvious that traditional exotic tone woods are a resource that will become scarcer and scarcer in this world. Right? And it's not just because we use that wood, it's also because a lot of other industries also have a really high demand for that wood, like rosewood. I think the biggest consumer of rosewood is actually China, but not for guitars. So generally, the outlook is that kind of material will become scarcer. It's going to become more expensive. It's probably going to become less reliably available in the future. We have built up reserves for us that nobody needs to be worried for the next chapter of Martin that we're going to run out. But that is one side of the question. I think the other side is that being responsible about how we use materials and how we deal with these traditional scarce resources is also important for us, right? And so how did we deal with that? Historically, we had very high standards about how much of the wood we would buy we would actually use, right? Now, I think we are more open to actually use more of that wood and do things like multi-piece tops or backs or necks even. And we know ultimately, while there is a tradition of some players really caring about that stuff, the more we move in the future, the fewer people actually will come with the baggage where they say it has to be this way or it has to be that way. But I think as we move forward, more and more people will understand that climate change, right, whether it's man-created or human-created or not, doesn't really matter, but it's very real. And people feel that and see that already, and it's going to impact their wallet. And so do we really think that some of these traditions will trump concerns about responsibly using some of these materials? Looking for alternatives. Martin has used Richlight instead of ebony on neck, on fingerboards for actually quite a while. That wasn't me. That was actually thanks to Chris Martin and the team to push some of these alternatives. So there will be more alternatives. I think there will be for the foreseeable future still enough of this traditional material available. But we don't want to just think about, well, let's just continue how we've been thinking about these materials. Let's have a broader outlook. And so we have multiple things we're doing to try to tackle that problem. There's another aspect of supply chain, just very briefly, that everybody who imported materials from overseas during the pandemic also had to deal with. Supply chain transportation was just really, really complicated, right? And getting stuff through customs was complicated. That has stabilized, it has normalized, so we actually feel pretty good about that piece. Except for what I would say, China is a real continued area of concern because there are lots of challenges tied to China. So we have our factory in Mexico and Nazareth, obviously, but we also have a factory in Mexico, and we feel pretty good that we have a near-short solution there because it does make transportation a little bit easier. And obviously, for the wood, we still have to transport it from all over the world, but supply chain is less of a concern now than it was a few years ago.
Wonderful. I think we're out of time. I just want to encourage everybody, Martin's room is right there. Keep the dialogue coming. Talk to Thomas or any of the folks there. Ask them questions about the models they have, where they're going. Like, that's the beauty of an event like this, is you actually get interaction, which you would never get sitting behind your keyboard at home. So, Thomas, thank you.
Jason, thank you, and thank
I'm honored.
you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're really awesome.
Thank you.
All right, that was my conversation with Thomas Ripsam, the CEO of Martin Guitars. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for tuning in. If you love the show, do me a favor, share it with your friends on social media, go onto the guitar forums you still frequent, tell people about it, and if you really want to be my best friend, leave us a review over on Apple Podcasts. It goes a long way towards helping others find the show. Till next time.